When my husband found out that I couldn't inherit my father's estate, he yelled at me. "What? You can't inherit the property? I have no use for you anymore. I want a divorce right now." After that, I got my revenge on my husband and my sister, who remarried quickly. My name is Julie, and I am a 32-year-old office worker who has been married to Brian for 2 years. I met Brian through a relative's introduction, and we got married. My family was quite wealthy, but since my sister, Mary, and I were the only children, our relatives worried about finding an heir, so they introduced Brian, saying he would be fine as a son-in-law. Although my husband didn't end up becoming an adopted son-in-law, he started living with my family at my parents' house. My mother passed away a few years ago, and now my father, my husband, and I live in our family home. My husband seems very kind and treats my father well, but the relative who introduced him warned me about something right before our marriage. "I know I introduced Brian to you, but be careful. He can be a bit obsessed with money." Even though I was about to get married and had already done the engagement ceremony, I couldn't see any signs of my husband being money obsessed, so we went ahead and got married. Even after we married, I kept an eye on my husband because of the relative's words, but he didn't seem to be obsessed with money. However, he did seem curious about my father's wealth, sometimes casually asking how much property we had when he joined my father for a drink. Since my father didn't hide anything, I didn't worry about it too much. Another thing my husband was interested in was my sister. My sister is 5 years younger than me, and unlike my calm demeanor, she's bright and active and has a flashy social life with men. She doesn't look like me at all, and my husband was surprised when he first saw her. "Your sister is so different from you, Julie, isn't she?" Seeing my husband's fascination by my sister, who is a beautiful woman with striking features, opposed to my plain looks, made me feel a bit uneasy. Still, the reason our relatives introduced me to him was that they were worried I wouldn't get married due to my modest looks and personality, and then there would be no one to carry on our family name. At the time, I thought there was no need to worry since I had a beautiful sister, but I later realized why our relatives were concerned. My father spoiled my sister a lot, letting her go to college after high school and then to a vocational school after graduation. My sister didn't have any specific goals for attending college or vocational school. She just didn't want to work. My mother was strict with my sister, trying to persuade her to find a job after college, but my father insisted on sending her to a vocational school. After graduating from vocational school, my sister got a job at my father's friend's company, but quit after 6 months. I was shocked by the excuse my sister gave when she quit her job. "I can't fully use my talents at that company." My sister, who hadn't even worked for half a year, was acting as if she already understood everything about her job, which left my mother and me dumbfounded. However, my father seemed to believe my sister and quickly found her another job. A while after starting her new job, my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. When my mother was in the hospital, my sister visited her every day, taking time off work. In the end, she quit this job as well and started saying she would take care of our sick mother. Taking care, however, only meant being in the hospital room, chatting with our mother, or staring at her smartphone in the waiting room. I had to go get our mother's laundry and replace it with new clothes during her hospital stay, while my sister was of no help at all. Though my mother might have been happy to have someone to talk to, her condition worsened so much after about a month that she could no longer even have a conversation. 2 weeks after her condition worsened, our mother passed away. My father and sister were so shaken by the sudden loss that they couldn't even prepare for the funeral, so I had to do it. Thanks to the help of our relatives, we were able to send off our mother somehow. After our mother's death, my sister started working part-time and moved out of our family home to live alone. Since her part-time income wasn't enough to pay the rent, our father covered the rent and utility bills, and it seemed my sister spent the money she earned on having fun. When her part-time income wasn't enough, she would go to our father and ask for an allowance. When our mother was alive, She'd been strict with my sister, so our father didn't give her any allowance after she started working. But now he was giving her as much as she wanted. I thought it was no problem if both my father and sister were happy with that arrangement. Even after I got married and started living with my husband in my family home, my father continued giving my sister an allowance. At that time, I didn't realize that my sister was also asking my husband for money, and he was happily giving it to her. Being unable to say no to my beautiful sister, my husband would secretly give her money, saying, "Don't tell Julie about this. She might get jealous if she finds out." My sister would only work part-time when she felt like it and live off the money she got from our father and my husband. But her carefree lifestyle didn't last forever, as our father fell ill and had to be hospitalized. I took care of our father during my breaks from work, but my sister never showed up at the hospital. Instead, she started calling me and demanding money. "I've been getting money from Dad every month, so I want you to keep giving it to me. The rent and utilities are all being withdrawn from Dad's account after all." She spoke to me angrily, but I was shocked to learn this for the first time. I got angry at my sister, who only cared about her own life instead of worrying about our hospitalized father. I really wanted to hang up on her, but she seemed to be in trouble, so I asked her how much money our father had been giving her every month. "How much have you been getting from Dad every month? Hurry up and get a job so you can live on the money you earn." My sister replied grumpily, "You're so annoying. I've been getting $1,000 a month. That's not including rent and utilities, by the way." I was appalled by my sister, who boasted about the amount she was receiving. I thought that if our father kept giving such a grown-up sister so much money, that she would lose any motivation to work seriously. I didn't think it was much of a problem to give my sister money, since I believed our father would recover quickly. However, our father's condition suddenly worsened, and I hurriedly contacted our relatives. The doctor told me it was a serious situation, and I was deeply shocked. During times like these, I wanted my husband's support, but he rarely showed up to the hospital, saying he was busy with work. Moreover, when he did visit, he would ask me inappropriate questions like, "Your father's inheritance must be huge, right? Since you and your sister are the only heirs, are you going to split it in half?" I had no words to respond to my husband, who only talked about the inheritance. I realized that what the relatives meant when they said my husband was obsessed with money and felt disgust. When my sister received a call, I explained that our father was in a critical condition, but she only worried about her own finances. "Make sure you pay me my monthly allowance. I can't survive without that money." The call ended abruptly. I was angry at my sister's response, but I was also concerned about the faint male voice I heard on the other end. I recognized the voice and had a bad feeling. About a month later, my father passed away, and neither my sister nor my husband showed up during his last moments. Having experienced my mother's funeral, I realized how heavy-hearted funeral preparations could be. On top of that, neither my sister nor my husband helped at all, and my sister didn't even attend the funeral. My husband did show up at the funeral, but he disappeared immediately afterward, claiming he had work. The relative who introduced me to my husband noticed his absence and asked me about it. "Where's your husband? It's strange for the chief mourner to be absent, isn't it?" All I could do was force a smile and answer, "He seems to be busy with work, so he went back." The relative sighed upon hearing my explanation, and I felt like sighing too. Once the funeral was over and I could finally catch my breath, my husband grinned and asked me, "So, how much did you inherit? Even if you split it in half, you'll get a lot of money, right?" As the relatives had warned before our marriage, my husband seemed to only care about my father's inheritance. Disappointed by my husband's true nature, I gave him an evasive answer. "My sister gets $1 billion and I get 0. We haven't talked to the lawyer yet, and I haven't had time to process my feelings since the funeral just ended." Seeing my husband happily talking about the inheritance, I felt laughing out of anger. Believing my words, my husband yelled, "What? You can't inherit any property? I don't need you anymore. Let's divorce right now." I felt the same way, so I retorted, "Let's do that. You only married me for your father's inheritance in the first place. I'll divorce you." With that, I shoved the prepared divorce papers in front of my husband. As if anticipating this, I took out the divorce papers, which seemed to surprise him a bit, but he signed them anyway. After signing the divorce papers, my husband left the house saying, "I'll divorce you, who gets zero inheritance, and marry your sister to get the $1 billion." I didn't care and immediately went to the city hall to submit the divorce papers. I was able to leave my terrible husband. My ex-husband submitted his marriage registration with my sister the very next day. A few days later, my ex-husband called me. Still believing that story, he yelled, "When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Mary her $1 billion already." I had been waiting for my ex-husband to contact me. I didn't want to reach out to him after he left our house. I replied to my ex-husband in a business-like tone, "Let's have a discussion at my place this Sunday. I'm preparing for the procedure and waiting for you." Brian, my ex-husband, was thrilled at the thought of receiving an inheritance and hung up the phone, but I was looking forward to seeing his face when he found out the truth. Over the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister Mary came to our parents' house, and both of them were surprised that I had called a lawyer. However, Brian seemed to convince himself and said, "I guess we need a lawyer when we're inheriting a large amount of the money." Then the lawyer, with a puzzled look, started talking to Brian. "There is a matter of inheritance, but before that, there is a matter of a claim for compensation from Julie, your ex-wife, towards you, Brian." He showed Brian several photos. In those photos, Brian was coming out of Mary's house, and the date was clearly written. The lawyer continued talking to Brian. "Since these are photos proving infidelity before the divorce, you have to pay compensation." When I heard Brian talking about the inheritance over the phone with Mary, I immediately asked the lawyer to investigate Brian's infidelity. Maybe he thought I was too busy with my father's funeral, but Brian and Mary met at Mary's house almost every day, and thanks to that, I was able to get many evidence photos. The conversation about inheritance turned into a conversation about compensation, and both Mary and Brian were speechless. But Brian quickly recovered and retorted, "Compared to the 100 million inheritance, compensation is just a small amount. I'll pay it right away." When the lawyer handed him the compensation claim documents, he signed them easily. After confirming that, I told Brian, "I'll make sure you pay the compensation since you've signed it. But be happy with Mary, who has zero inheritance." The moment Mary heard zero inheritance, she screamed, "What do you mean my inheritance is zero? I'm supposed to have 100 million. Brian's face turned red, and he got angry, saying, "There's no way there's zero inheritance. I won't let you take it all for yourself." The lawyer calmly started explaining to the angry pair. "Mary is the daughter of your late mother from a previous marriage, and since she has not been legally adopted by your late father, there is no legal parent-child relationship. Therefore, Mary cannot inherit your father's estate." I also told Mary, who seemed to be confused, "I don't think you remember because you were only 1 year old when our parents got remarried, but I remember it clearly. I was 6 years old when our parents remarried, and I remember being happy that I suddenly had a sister. I never thought that such a sister would steal my husband. Both our parents were struggling with young children and had someone mediate between them, thinking it would be best for them to remarry. My mother treated me like her real daughter, and my father treated Mary with care. My father might have spoiled Mary because she was not his real daughter, and he wanted to be extra careful with her. Our parents each had a child when they remarried, and my mother, who was suspected by relatives of marrying my wealthy father for his money, refused to have Mary legally adopted by him. The reason the relatives kept recommending marriage proposals to me was that they knew I was the only one who could inherit my father's estate. If our parents had had a child together, things might have gotten even more complicated, but fortunately or unfortunately, they didn't have any children. They might have decided not to have children to avoid future inheritance disputes. It has now become clear that our father continued to support my sister financially after she became an adult because he couldn't pass on his inheritance to her. I am not legally related to my mother because we did not go through adoption, but it never bothered me in daily life. It seemed our parents never told my sister that they were both remarried, and she found out the truth for the first time that day. My ex-husband's face changed from red to pale as soon as he realized the situation. He signed the documents and was even asked to pay for damages when he couldn't get the inheritance he had been expecting from my sister. With a blue face, my ex-husband said to me, "Was what you said about my sister getting $10 billion and me getting nothing a lie?" Holding back laughter, I said, "Of course it was a lie. It was to get back at you for cheating on me behind my back. Besides, there's no way Dad's inheritance was worth $10 million. Even our wealthy father didn't have an inheritance of $10 million. My sister, who had been silent until now, suddenly screamed, "I've made a lot of purchases relying on Dad's inheritance. What will happen to the money he used to give me? Will you pay for me, big sister?" I answered my frightened sister, "You have a reliable husband now, so you don't need it anymore, right? Have Brian support you." My sister looked at my pale-faced ex-husband, but he shook his head. "I also have made various purchases expecting the inheritance. So I don't have the means to support you. Besides, I have to pay for damages, so I'm barely managing myself." After saying that, my ex-husband suddenly knelt down in front of me and started apologizing. "Julie, I'm sorry. It was my fault. Will you forgive me and take me back?" The lawyer, who had been watching, laughed while packing up to leave. His arrogant attitude from earlier was gone, and he looked ridiculous kneeling down. After the discussion, my ex-husband and sister left with their heads down, and they soon got divorced. For my ex-husband, who remarried with the intention of inheriting my sister's assets, he was no longer interested in her when she didn't receive the inheritance. He told me he couldn't take care of my sister because he had to pay me damages. Since my ex-husband had no property, we agreed that he would pay the damages in installments from his monthly salary. The lawyer advised that this way I wouldn't miss out on anything. My sister, now without our father's support, worked part-time every day, but she couldn't pay off her debts and ended up filing for bankruptcy. She eventually had to leave her apartment, and no one knows where she went. Our father had supported my sister out of love, but in the end he spoiled her too much, and she became unable to work seriously. Later, a relative tried to introduce me to a potential marriage partner again while I started living alone in my childhood home, but I declined. I don't want to be introduced to someone like my ex-husband again, so this time I want to find a suitable marriage partner on my own.
"I'm divorcing you because my mistress is pregnant with a son. You're a defective product for not bearing a son. So get out." "Mistress? You can't mean that woman." Pointing at the woman next to her husband, Brian, the woman retorted with displeasure. "Don't point at me. I'm Aurora. How rudely middle-aged of you." "That's right. That's why I'm dumping you." Brian and Aurora sneered. I was dumbfounded. How can she openly admit to being a mistress? Normally, you'd hide such a thing. And to divorce because his mistress is pregnant? There's a limit to making selfish claims. Does he have any idea how much I've put up with? Well, divorce suits me fine. I have plenty of evidence, and he's admitted to the affair. I'll discard this husband for compensation. I'm going to bring him to the lowest of lows. Prepare yourself. I clenched my back teeth and headed to my room. My name is Serenity. I'm a 43-year-old housewife raising 4 daughters. My eldest, Luna, is 11 and in middle school. Stella, 9, is in elementary school and mostly takes care of herself. But the younger 2, 5-year-old twins, Mary and Lily, still need a lot of support. Still, I cherish being able to care for them now. It makes these precious days all the more enjoyable. You might think we have a happy family, but in reality, we don't. The in-laws I live with, Dominic and Hazel, are always complaining about me, and Brian is hardly ever home. Our marital and family relationships are as bad as they can get. Brian must be cheating with someone somewhere. Of course, I've hired someone to investigate Brian's conduct, but the girls need their father. With that in mind, divorce doesn't seem so simple. My resentment only grows. If it weren't for living with Dominic and Hazel, it might not have come to this. It's regrettable, but there was nothing to be done at the time. Brian and I met through a mutual acquaintance. Back then, I was working as a hairstylist at my mom Grace's salon and was close to a woman in the neighborhood named Natalie. "I know a man about your age who frequents my favorite jewelry shop." Natalie started talking about this man. His name was Brian. He appeared to be the heir to a jewelry sales company, an elite graduate who was too busy with work to meet women. "Why don't you meet him?" "I'm not in the same league as an elite. It's just a meeting." Eventually, I couldn't refuse and agreed to meet Brian. But when we actually met, we hit it off surprisingly well. I was impressed by his fondness for children, and his elite status made him quite smooth in handling things. That's how we started dating with marriage in mind. After Brian proposed to me, I accepted the marriage. However, when we went to a family meeting at the in-laws' house, Dominic said to me, "Our family runs a business. Both my wife and I are busy, so we prefer a daughter-in-law who can manage household chores." "I live with my mom, and I take care of the household chores," I replied. Hazel's attitude changed upon hearing this. "Oh? If you're good at housework, let's live together. It'll be more convenient for both of us, right?" I was surprised. I couldn't see how it was convenient for both of us. But, without a chance to express my opinion, the decision was made to live together. I thought it was a mistake, but it was too late for regrets. Brian seemed to agree with the living arrangement. "Well, we can discuss living separately once we settle down. Brian will be on my side, so it should be fine." I compromised. This was a big mistake. As soon as we got married, Hazel dumped all the household chores on me. "Serenity, I'm off to work, so please take care of the cleaning and laundry," she said. "Yes," I replied. Hazel became an employee at Dominic's company, but it was only on paper. Essentially, she pushed the chores onto me and went out to enjoy herself. The atmosphere wasn't right to bring up living separately. I sighed in resignation. Still, I could endure being burdened with housework since Brian's income was good and I had become a housewife after marriage. Despite my complaints, I earnestly tackled the chores. However, one day, Dominic asked for a favor. "We're in a bind because a part-time employee took off. Could you help out at the store?" His company was a jewelry sales business involved in wholesale and also owning retail stores. He was essentially asking me to work as a salesperson. Though I had my grievances, I was living with Dominic. If I were to refuse, it would sour the atmosphere at home. Reluctantly, I accepted the job. That was my second big mistake. Dominic, encouraged by this success, frequently asked for my help at the company. I missed the chance to refuse and ended up doing whatever Dominic asked. Honestly, I was even considering divorce. Then, I discovered I was pregnant. When I shared this with Dominic and Hazel, they were overjoyed. "Wonderful, Serenity! You must prioritize your health now. No need for household or work chores." Yes, right. I must inform the relatives. Dominic began contacting relatives in a flurry. Watching him, Brian spoke to me. "Sorry, Dad and Mom are just excited." "No, it's okay. I'm happy they're happy." "That's good. Make sure to have a healthy baby." Brian's words were the most encouraging. From that day, my life changed drastically. Hazel took over the household chores she had pushed onto me. Meanwhile, I was able to relax and rest. Dominic no longer asked me to help with work. This way, I can look forward to a calm delivery. Several months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl without any complications. However, when Dominic and Hazel came to see the baby, their faces fell with disappointment. Despite feeling anxious, I showed them my daughter. "Look, a healthy girl. We named her Luna." "Oh, that's a nice name," Hazel said, clearly disappointed. Dominic felt the same. "Well, having a sister will make a boy grow up strong. Make sure the next one is a boy," he said. "Yes," I replied, confused. After Dominic and Hazel left, I asked Brian about their strange behavior. Was something wrong with Dominic and them? Probably because it's a girl, he guessed. What do you mean? As I pressed, Brian began to explain with a dejected look. His family had been running a company since his grandfather's time, and as it was a family business, there was a need for a male heir. Dominic and Hazel had been hoping for a boy, so my giving birth to a girl was a disappointment to them. Well, make sure the next one is a boy, Brian said, looking dissatisfied. I was furious. Was he suggesting that a girl couldn't be a successor? That's not true. Girls can work too. In fact, for jewelry sales, a girl might even have an advantage. What's wrong with these people? I found myself wanting a divorce right away. But with Luna here, that wasn't an option. I'll endure at least until Luna is grown. After being discharged from the hospital, my life reverted to how it was before pregnancy. Every day, I was burdened with household and work duties, on top of taking care of Luna. Enduring the pain, I carried on with my life. Eventually, I became pregnant again, but once more, it was a girl. We named her Stella, but Dominic, Hazel, and even Brian showed little interest. Years passed, and I experienced my third pregnancy, which turned out to be twin girls. Predictably, Dominic, Hazel, and Brian showed no interest, even going as far to dump more household chores on me. Even after giving birth to the twins, Mary and Lily, the situation didn't change. I started seriously considering divorce. Then, Brian and I had a heated argument over educational policies. She's just a girl, she'll be fine on her own. Nowadays, girls also need to study with college in mind. Huh? As long as a woman looks good, she can get married. She doesn't need to study. Brian and I argued like this every day. Naturally, our relationship progressively worsened. Eventually, Brian began to spend nights away from home. He must be having an affair, I thought, growing angry. Enduring this isn't good for my health. I visited a detective agency nearby and requested an investigation into Brian's behavior. It'll take a few weeks for the results. I better prepare for everything. I made up my mind. First, I would explain the situation to my daughters. Dad and Mom might not be able to get along anymore. Mary and Lily looked confused, but Luna and Stella seemed to understand. I'm fine. I hate Dad anyway. Yeah, Dad is always angry, so I don't like him either. It seems my daughters take after me. With this, I can find the right time to bring up divorce. I felt relieved. Then, one Sunday morning, someone visited early. Who could it be? As I wondered, Brian came in with a guest. Serenity, we need to talk. Brian had brought a young woman with him, who was smiling oddly, pleased with herself, and wore flashy makeup. Since you couldn't give me an heir, I found a woman who can. What? A woman who can produce an heir? Isn't that cheating? Confused, Brian continued, stroking the woman's belly. Well, that's the situation. At that moment, I understood everything. Brian continued with a nasty grin. I'm divorcing you because my mistress is pregnant with a son. You're a defective product for not bearing a son. So get out. Mistress? You can't mean that woman. Pointing at the woman next to Brian. Then the woman retorted displeased. Don't point at me. I'm Aurora. How rude of a middle-aged woman. Exactly. That's why I'm dumping you. Brian and Aurora sneered together. I was dumbfounded. How can she openly admit to being a mistress? Normally, you'd hide such a thing. And to divorce because his mistress is pregnant? He should limit his selfishness. Does he have any idea how much I've tolerated? Well, divorce suits me fine. I have plenty of evidence, and he's admitted to the affair. I'll discard this husband for compensation. I'll make sure he hits rock bottom. Be prepared. I clenched my back teeth and headed to my room. There, I noticed my 4 daughters outside the room. Holding them close, I whispered, I couldn't make up with Dad. Don't cry, Mom. We're here for you. Luna comforted me. I hugged my 4 daughters tightly. Then we began preparing to move. I contacted a moving company and also called my mom, Grace. Mom? About what happened recently. It didn't work out, did it? Mom gently asked. I had informed her when I requested the investigation. It seems Brian is cheating, so I might get a divorce. Yeah, that's right. Then you've got a tough road ahead. Come back home immediately. I'm preparing everything. Thank you, Mom. Later, I moved back to my parents' house with my 4 daughters. Although I had been worried, my daughters didn't seem down. In fact, they were happy to go to their grandma's house. But that doesn't resolve everything. The discussions about child support and compensation weren't finished yet. Moving back, I could resume working as a hairstylist like before. But it would be tough without child support. I hope we can have a reasonable discussion. That was my only concern. After moving, I started discussions with Brian about compensation in the divorce proceedings. But, as expected, we were at an impasse. You're divorcing me because you cheated. It's because you couldn't bear a son. I haven't done anything wrong, Brian boldly claimed. Does he not think cheating is wrong? I was appalled by his childish attitude. Eventually, months passed without any resolution. By then, Brian had stopped answering my calls. I guess I have no choice but to go to his office. I was contemplating this when suddenly my mobile phone rang. It was Brian on the other end. Serenity, can you talk right now? After all this time avoiding me, now you want to talk? How self-centered. I retorted with displeasure. Brian went silent, so I hurried to continue before he could hang up. So, what do you want to talk about? I was wondering, would you consider remarrying me? I thought I had misheard. So I asked Brian to clarify. Did you just say remarry? You're joking, right? I'm not joking. Things are just the worst right now. Brian sounded quite down. Despite the hassle, I asked why. Brian then shared his story. A few days before the call, he received a message at work from his parents that Aurora was about to give birth. Thinking the long-awaited son was arriving, Brian rushed to the hospital. By the time he arrived, Aurora had already given birth. But Brian found his parents standing dumbfounded outside the delivery room. Did something happen to Aurora? Brian asked the doctor. The doctor said the birth was successful. Curious, Brian went to see the baby. At the newborn room, a nurse pointed out Brian's child. But the moment he saw the baby, Brian turned pale. The baby clearly wasn't mine. But if it was just born, I began suggesting perhaps it was too soon to tell. But Brian interrupted loudly. The baby's skin was dark. But Aurora and I are both white. It was evidently not his child. I figured as much. I found myself responding. Brian retorted with displeasure. What do you mean by figured? Before you decided to divorce me, I had an investigation done on you, I explained. An investigation? Brian was shocked. I continued nonchalantly. I had your affair partner, Aurora. Was that her name? I had her investigated too. And? She had other men she was close to, including a black man. Maybe he's the real father, I teased. But I thought, you really believe that? It's laughable. Like a young woman would be satisfied with a middle-aged man. I laughed loudly at him. Brian's anger exploded, raising his voice. Shut up! Don't laugh! Ignoring Brian's words, I laughed heartily before bringing up the subject of child support and compensation. About the child support and compensation. Shut up! I said we should remarry. And I said no, I yelled back, and Brian shouted even louder. If you don't want to remarry, then you raise the kids. That's the condition for paying compensation and child support. What an outrageous thing to say. I was so appalled I was left speechless, and he hung up on me. After that, the phone went unanswered. If he won't take my calls, we can't talk. I don't want to see him, but I guess I have to go to his company, I muttered as I shoved my mobile phone into my pocket. Then I went down to the beauty salon below. Natalie, a client, was waiting there, and Mom was attending to another client. I greeted Natalie with a friendly smile. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's okay, but I'm sorry for the trouble with that matter. Natalie was considerate enough to not mention Brian's name. No, it's fine. We're just arguing about the compensation. Are you really okay? Natalie looked at me with concern. I faked a smile. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong, so he doesn't plan to apologize. That's tough. It would ignite a firestorm if it got out on the internet, but I don't plan to blow things up that much. I laughed as I responded. I noticed Mom's client eavesdropping. It's better than bad rumors spreading. I pretended not to notice and started my work. Eventually, Mom's client left while I was cutting Natalie's hair. Then Natalie spoke up. Serenity, about the client just now. Shouldn't you have asked her not to spread the word? It seemed Natalie also noticed the eavesdropping. If bad rumors spread, maybe they'll learn their lesson, I replied with a smile. Soon, Natalie's haircut was finished. I left the rest to Mom and retreated to the back. Then I tried calling Brian again, but he didn't answer. A few days later, on a day the beauty salon was closed, I went to Brian's company. However, Brian wasn't there. I was told he was at the store. Reluctantly, I headed to the store. As soon as I entered, I heard a familiar voice. Oh, what brings you here? Looking up, I saw Hazel standing at the counter. It's been a while. How vulgar of you to barge in here. Despite her bold words, Hazel seemed somewhat emaciated, likely affected by the revelation that Aurora's child wasn't Brian's. I addressed Hazel with a disdainful smile. Can't help it. He's been avoiding me. What did you say? I just want to be compensated. How do you plan to take responsibility? My words caused a stir among the customers in the store. Hazel, sensing the situation, began to panic suddenly. Please, not here. Stop this. But it's all about settling with money, right? That's better, isn't it? I said this exaggeratedly, causing quite a commotion around us. Unable to bear it, Hazel grabbed my hand and led me to the back of the store where Brian was working. Hazel addressed him. Brian, you have a visitor. Brian looked up, and our eyes met. Serenity? Since you've been ignoring me, I had to come to you. No, I wasn't ignoring you. It's just that... Brian became flustered. I told him, laughing. What about the child support and compensation? That is, well, you can pay, right, Mr. Future President? I said this sarcastically. Brian finally seemed to give in. All right, I'll pay. Just stop. This way, the discussion about child support and compensation finally began. However, this wasn't really a discussion. The details of the compensation had already been decided. It was just a matter of Brian agreeing and signing. He had been avoiding this because he was fixated on remarrying me. My visit was also to firmly reject any talk of remarriage. I watched Brian sign with a mocking smile. After leaving the store, I was approached by Aurora. She was wearing miserable clothes, a far cry from her appearance that day. Long time no see. What happened to you? You look terrible. I said this mockingly, and Aurora scowled. It's your fault because you wouldn't take the child. Aurora was kicked out by Brian because I refused to take her child, and she was blaming me. She didn't seem to understand the concept of reaping what you sow. However, this meant I would be criticized, so I diverted Aurora's attention. Don't complain to me. Ask Brian for child support. But Brian is angry that my child isn't his. Aurora looked down. I smirked unpleasantly. I'm sure he'll listen now. He was in a good mood since he listened to me. Of course, that was a lie. However, if Aurora entered the store, an argument was bound to happen. But then it would seem as if, following our previous interaction, a disturbance had occurred. Brian's company's reputation could be destroyed in an instant. That's what I thought. Is that so? Then I'll go. Aurora entered the store. I watched her go and then walked away from the shop. I didn't check what happened, but that evening, local news reported a woman causing a disturbance in the store. Hopefully, this taught them a lesson. I was smugly satisfied. However, a few days later, the situation took an unexpected turn. This was a few days after I met with Brian. While preparing to open the shop, the store's phone rang. Thank you for calling. Is this for a reservation? I assumed it was a customer and responded with the usual greeting. However, what came through the phone was Hazel's voice, mixed with the sound of a commotion. This isn't about a reservation. What have you done? Hazel? I asked, taken aback. Hazel raised her voice. It's your doing, isn't it? The store is swamped with people right now. Excuse me? The store is popular. Is that what you mean? No, everyone's here to cancel their orders. The call ended abruptly with loud voices in the background, leaving me perplexed. After getting permission from Mom, I headed to Brian's company store. As I approached, I saw a huge crowd outside. Dominic, Hazel, and Brian were trying to calm the gathered crowd. Soon, Hazel spotted me. The moment she did, Hazel raised her voice. What are you going to do about this? What happened here? Rumors of bankruptcy are spreading, all because of you. I was at a loss, having no idea what she meant, so I asked Hazel to explain from the beginning. According to Hazel, after my visit to the store, a customer came in wanting to cancel a jewelry purchase. Hazel, having not yet ordered the product, accepted the cancellation. However, cancellations began to increase until a crowd formed. I had an inkling about the cause, but asked anyway. Why did this happen? There's a rumor on the internet saying it's dangerous. While talking, the crowd pushed me away from Brian and the others, forcing me to leave the scene. I learned the full story a few days later. The whole incident unfolded like this. It all started with a conversation in my beauty salon. That day, a client who had overheard my conversation with Natalie posted anonymously on the internet. There's someone arguing over compensation. The son of a jewelry company's president. They must have thought it would be safe to post anonymously. Actually, that alone wasn't the problem. But a few days later, Hazel and I ended up arguing in the store. Someone who saw that posted similarly online. There's a commotion at a certain jewelry shop. They're talking about compensation. Then the news about Aurora topped it off, making it easy to identify the company and store, leading to rumors that the store was in danger. This turned into bankruptcy rumors, causing customers to rush for cancellations, similar to a bank run during a financial crisis. Consequently, the company went bankrupt, leaving Dominic, Hazel, and Brian in debt. Now they're living on part-time jobs, leaving me worried about receiving child support and compensation. I should have taken the child support and compensation in one go, I occasionally thought, but living quietly and happily with my 4 daughters is fulfilling enough. My daughters are more important than money, without a doubt.